In this conversation, we'll explore our personal relationship with God, Goddess, all that is. One way to say that is to explore our spirituality, our relationship with something that's greater than ourselves. But everyone has a lot of different meanings of that word spirit and spirituality. So God, Goddess, and the synergy of God, Goddess, all that is, certainly the all that is a pretty good place to start, because all that is has to include any subsets of all that is. First there is the one, first there is the whole, all that is. Then we divide the one with language, with the illusion of language, into good and bad, up and down, right and left, male and female, God and Goddess. But the all that is the synergy, or is the whole. So, it's pretty self-referential. All that is must include all that is. If you can think of it, if you can speak it, it's included in all that is. So if we look at our relationship with all that is, and within that context, all the many forms of energy that are more complex than our own, that are more than we are. It's obvious that most things in the universe are bigger than we are. With that, depending on how we measure power, most things in the universe are more powerful. Certainly there are trillions and trillions of stars and planets and asteroids, etc., that are bigger and that have more mass. So if we measure power by impact, certainly a larger object is going to have more impact. There's question, I think it's a somewhat arrogant assumption that amongst all the trillions and trillions and trillions of stars, and if we extrapolate the current data, several trillion planets capable of supporting life within the universe, it's, even if we play a roll of the dice and say that it's 50-50 with each given planet, out in the universe, whether or not in a certain number of billions of years there's going to be life. Well, even if it's 1 in 100, like if those are the odds of a planet developing some form of complex life in 30 billion years, whatever the current guesswork is, or the current estimate, well, then, why would we face such a vast unknown with the assumption that we are the best the universe has got? A little arrogant. We haven't visited any of those trillions of stars capable, or trillions of planets capable of supporting human life. And, just so you know where that number comes from, we're currently estimating in the areas that we've been able to measure that there are several billion planets capable of supporting some form of intelligent life. And then most of the universe is outside that area that we've been able to measure. If we extrapolate that same volume of life potentiated planets into the unknown areas, you get to a figure of trillions of probable planets capable of supporting human life. And really, we are the best one out of all those trillions. It just doesn't seem that likely. But back to our relationship with all that is. Now, the first thing that I want to address is this experience of, which is reflected in our mythology of being abandoned, of descending, of falling from the garden, of being banished to the toil of, work on earth, etc., depending on the mythology, there is this sense of partition between the human being and the divine. And this partition is a matter of perspective. You can look at all that is, right? You've got all that is. Then we can look at us, and the human orifice in many ways, the skin, you could kind of look at a body as kind of a bag, a garbage bag, a burlap bag, or whatever that we kind of draped our consciousness with. And then we have, and in that sense, we feel completely separate. If we were to get into a bag or a 50-gallon drum or whatever and look down and block ourselves off, it would seem like, the rest of the world has left us, the rest of reality has left us. But really, it's looking at us and including us physiologically, energetically. We're still a part of the equation. It's just we can't see anything in this cloaked, with a sheet over our head, etc. So what we've done is we've poked a couple of holes in the sheet. One set of holes is called eyes, one set of holes is called nose, one set of holes is called mouth, one set of holes is called nerves or touch. And so these are ports through which energy can consciously flow, meaning there's all the unconscious flow of atomic and subatomic levels that's flowing through us. There's radio waves. There's an endless amount of connection between us and all that is on so many different dimensions, but we're not tracking it. We're not measuring it. So from reality's perspective, we are innately connected on all dimensions to all that is. But from our perspective, we're only consciously registering a small percentage of the data that comes in through our eyes, our mouth, our nose, our ears, our touch. And all the other stuff is unconscious. Right? So we are not consciously connected with all that is in a variety of different ways. And even our little holes that we've poked through only let in certain frequencies, right? So our eyes do not let in all light. They let in light in a certain bandwidth. Our ears do not let in all sound. They let in sound that fits into the bandwidth that our ears can measure, right? And so even of what we know that we know, which is, light waves, sound waves, etc., we know that we're only aware of maybe 20, 30% of what our eyes are actually picking up and what our ears are picking up. But we're also only picking up maybe 5% of the spectrum, right? So light continues above and below the range that our eyes can perceive by a pretty large degree, right? And sound continues, right? There are certain drum beats that happen once a million years, and those rhythms are not picked up by the human ears. There are certain rhythms that happen once a billion years, and those rhythms are not picked up by the human ears. There's also sounds of subatomic particles, and they're not picked up either. They're just outside the frequency range. So we have the experience of being cut off from all that is, because by enveloping consciousness in a body, in a bag, and then just poking a few little holes into that bag, and then just letting a little bit of all that could be let into that holes in, and then only paying attention to a very small portion of that, maybe 30% of our sensory data, and then we cut off another third with sleep, so we cut it all off. So we're down to, less than 1% of all that we could perceive. And yet, that doesn't mean that the universe is not connected to us, right? There have been, different experiments showing relationships between subatomic particles and other subatomic particles that are further away than even the speed of light can account for. And those are just the ones that we know at the moment. So what I'm suggesting is that we are inextricably connected to all that is in all kinds of different ways that we do not perceive as we look out of the bag into, little small sections of reality and try and pay attention to some of it. And then we make up a story about all of it based on that experience. And a lot of our mythological stories are stories that we are separate, that Goddess has left us, rather than that we've gone into a bag and poked a few holes in, blocked out most of it, so that we can pay attention to, very small segments of reality. Because what this is good for is focus, right? We're very good at focusing on very arcane, small sections of reality and making up stories about it. We're obviously, through that particular structure, not going to be that great at coming up with the big picture, right? So that's the first place that I want to kind of start. But I also want to look at all the ways that we are conscious of, right? In our little bag with our limited observing and measuring devices, all the different ways that we are connected to all that is. So let's start with the things that we know, right? Because there's all these things that we don't know. And we can't connect with those at this point because we don't know that we don't know them. There's other things that we don't know, right? And we can't connect with those either, other than in the abstract concept. But let's look at the things that we do know that we know. One of the things we know is time. We have an experience of measuring time. And so it's worth noting that we are inextricably connected to the fabric of time that is part of all that is, right? So the fabric of time, the past, the present, the future, let's make time into a circle, and then we can divide time into past, present, and future, right? So past, present, and future in a cycle. And to the degree that we have memory, we have a connection with the past. To the degree that we have imagination, we have forethought, we have connection to the future. To the degree that we have awareness and sensory data, we have a connection to the present. But in the fabric and in the cycle of time, all time, past, present, and future, is related to, in our current story, the Big Bang. So this is the Big Bang, right? At the very beginning, we have a pea-sized mass of energy that comes out of nowhere, apparently, and expands. Well, within that framework, right, time expands in all directions. Right? And every moment that time has been in existence, time has been getting bigger in all directions. And yet every moment of time in the present, in the past, and the future finds its way back to the original moment. And one of the vehicles for that is the paradigm of cause and effect, right? So if we look at this finger, we say that this finger traces itself back to the womb, right? Would you agree with that? That this finger here could not exist if the womb in which this finger was born did not exist. In other words, if you delete the past with the womb, this finger in the present doesn't exist. Well, similarly, if you delete the Big Bang, this whole moment, this whole timescape doesn't exist. So there's a connection between the first moment in time and every moment in time that grows out of that. If we imagine time as a tree growing out of that first thing, every little twig in the timescape, in the time tree, can all find its way back to that original moment, right? If that seed wasn't there, if it didn't come into being, then all the trunk doesn't come into being, and all the different possibilities in all the different places, or time is happening in this place and this place and this place, none of those come into being either. And so if we look at ourselves as a part of time in the present, we can trace this moment in time where we are in right now all the way back to the Big Bang. Right? We can first trace ourselves back to our original ancestors. Then we can trace ourselves back to the animals out of which we emerged. We can trace ourselves back to the ocean. We can trace ourselves back to the plantscapes. We can trace ourselves back to the forming of the planet, back to the forming of the solar system, all the way back to the Big Bang. And if any single moment, this is an interesting thing to understand, if any single moment was deleted, we can see time as kind of chain links, where one moment, where, for example, this moment is linked to the next moment, and the next moment. If any single link in the timescape was deleted, and there's no bridge between how this moment became this moment, because physicists tell us that energy is not created or destroyed, it moves. Energy transforms. It moves from one form to another. Energy moves from one form to another, and from there to another. And so everything that exists in the present moment has transformed many, 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 many billions of times to reach the present moment, right? But if you take one of those bridges, one of those iterations, one of those moments and delete it, there's no way for the past to jump that bridge if it's truly deleted to the present, right? And in that way, this present moment is inextricably connected to the very first moment. Now that's going backwards, but the same is true going forward. This energy that is resonating in the form of this body, is what, and we can call it whatever we call it. That's our language. Those are symbols. But this energy that is resonating in this certain shape will never be destroyed. This energy is going to become something else. Perhaps it will be incinerated, and it will become parts of air and ash. But the ash is not going to stay the same. It's going to turn into perhaps potash and be used to grow plants in a garden. Or perhaps the body will be laid in a garden. And it'll be laid in a garden, and nitrogen will be absorbed from plants out of the blood, etc. And so this body will transform again into a new pattern of energy, a new pattern of life, right? So that's going to keep happening. This energy is not going to ever disappear. And then what's going to happen with that new, that rose that grew out of the fertilizer of this body? Well, that rose is going to have a cycle, and then it's going to decay, and it's going to become soil. It's going to become organic matter, compost. And that compost will be absorbed by a tree, by another plant. Or maybe it'll be washed into a river and become algae that grows in the fertilizer of water and soil and sunlight, and there'll be an algae bloom. Right? But whatever happens, the energy that is in this body will continue for an eternity. And the future will be different because of this body for the rest of eternity. Meaning the energy that moves out of this and this and this, that future will be different by that amount of energy, which will just iterate and take new and new forms. In other words, I and you and I, are inextricably connected to all time. 1 trillion years in the future, there will be energy in a form that used to be this form, that used to be your form. And depending on what you do, where you put your body, etc., that will have an impact on that future. Long after your name and this form is forgotten, what's going on in the universe in 1 trillion years will be different because of what you do here in this time. And the same is true for every other thing in the universe, right? A rock is not going to just vanish. Maybe it'll be powdered. Maybe it'll erode. Maybe it'll become trace minerals. Maybe it'll do any number of things. Maybe it'll roll down this hole. Maybe it'll burn up in a volcano. But no matter what, the energy is going to keep changing form, evolving, revolving, emerging out of the current form, right? And that has happened since the very first moment of the Big Bang. So we are inextricably connected to the timescape on the time dimension, past, present, and future. For all of time, we have an innate connection. Well, now let's look at space. We are taking up space for now, right? Before we were here, something else was here. Space was here, more trees were here. I'm in a building right now. Before I was here, there were plants growing in this space. And those plants were removed and a structure was built here, and now I'm here. The energy has changed form into this form. And this form is linked in space. This place in space is linked to every other place in space, right? We can go out this way, and there's no point where there's just a complete, utter void. There's places where the subatomic particles are less dense, where the atomic and molecules are less dense and more frequent. But there's no place of absolute disconnected void. Right? Wherever we go in space, there is a relay of energy, a relationship all along the way, right? So we can keep traveling out in any direction in space. Right? And we can look at that on a microcosmic. We could set out east on a plane and just keep flying east. Eventually we'll come in from the west, right? And if we look and extrapolate that to a larger scale, all that has emerged in a spherical direction out from the Big Bang. If we find the ultimate edge of all that is at the moment and say this is as big as the universe has gotten, right? And just imagine it as a giant globe. Maybe it's going out this way more than that way, but a giant curved shape of some kind. We can set out, if we can travel faster than the universe is expanding by a significant speed, and we set out west, we'll eventually come around the universe and come up on the other side. But there is a spatial connection connecting all things. This is not empty void, right? Otherwise we couldn't go through it, right? There's atoms and molecules in space, and in every level of density, gaseous, liquid, hard objects. The density changes throughout the universe. But every single pattern of energy is spatially connected to every single pattern of energy throughout the entire universe. There isn't a single bit. There's bit where certain energy in certain forms can't move, where you can say, okay, you can't get a lead object to hold itself in midair, right? You can carry it across. But if you have a helium balloon going across, right, if it transforms, right, melt the lead, create heat a balloon, turn that energy of dense matter into lighter matter, right? There's a way where every single object in space can connect with every other object that is. There's also a connection between everything that is in this space and everything that was, right? So everything that exists in space today has a relationship with everything that used to exist, because it used to be that form, and now it moved, evolved, revolved into this form, transformed. It moved from one form to another. So everything in this space connects to every other thing in the present moment in space. And everything that is here in this space has a relationship through time with everything in the future with space, right? So there's a connection between all things in time and all things in space, and we are part of that connection.